Hello, everyone. Welcome to Creativity Hive's weekly program. My name is Miriam Haugen. I'm part of the Creativity Hive team. We help creatives learn to make impactful storytelling videos through one-on-one teaching, live group coaching, and live boot camps. Our weekly hangout brings you people working in all aspects of from broadcasting to video to and all the related industries from across the globe. So post a comment if you're checking in. If you're watching the replay, then uh, welcome to that as well. So today we are talking with Robbie Carman, and I'm going to bring Robbie and Neil onto the stream here. Hello, Robbie.
Hey guys, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So you are a professional colorist, and I want to hear about how, what is a professional colorist? Well, let's
Right.
assume that some people might not know.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a good question. So oftentimes you saw somebody at a dinner party or at a bar or something. You're hey, I'm a colorist, and they go, wow, can I book an appointment for you to do my hair? That kind of thing.
You're right.
That's a common confusion, common joke in the industry. But what I do, the best way to think about a colorist is somebody who enhances the final picture quality of a film, a television show, or whatever other piece of video. Right. I am not an editor, even though I know how to edit. Of course, I'm not piecing together a story. I'm not doing motion graphics. I do a little bit of visual effects, but my main job is to take a final edited show and improve the color and the contrast and the overall look of that show for a lot of different reasons. For creative reasons, to get the show to flow together, to feel like not any one single shot is going to take you, kind of out of the story. It's also to kind of improve, to make fixes, that sort of the correction part of color. You often hear that phrase, color correction. If something was undersaturated, overexposed, whatever the problem is, fixing that. And then the last stage of it, I think of mainly as, some people call it color grading. I like to just think about it as color enhancement. That is applying a unifying look and feel to the project if it so needs, right? Not every project needs, to look like, the Matrix or whatever, right? But sometimes, if you're going for a certain look and feel, that overarching piece of style or texture or whatever is there. And so once I touch a project, I'm one of the last stops in sort of the post-production chain, along with, audio mixing and sound design and that kind of stuff. And depending on the project, I'll either put everything together, our team will marry audio, marry graphics, do all the outputs, all that kind of stuff. Or sometimes we work with dedicated finishing editors to do that. But that's basically what a colorist does: improves the overall look and feel, continuity and flow of a project. And it's, when I talk to a lot of people trying to describe it in more detail, I often say it's kind of analogous to what an audio mixer does, right? Sort of sweetening, blending, enhancing, that kind of stuff. They're very similar paths, and so that makes sense to a lot of people because people are oftentimes more familiar with audio side of things than they are color side of things.
Awesome. I'm going to bring Mo on here too. Hello,
Hey,
Mo. Uh-oh. I don't hear any sound from you, Mo. So we'll let him get that sorted out. All right. So I am curious about your how did you become a colorist? Since a lot of people don't even know that career path exists.
I'm still trying to figure that out, Miriam. When I was in, a young lad in, middle school, high school, I had dreams and aspirations of becoming a rock star, like everybody else. Hence my guitars. I have a
right.
I have a guitar addiction problem with 30 odds, some of them scattered around the house. Anyway, I originally I had desires to go to school for music performance, guitar performance. But I also had, at that time, I had a real passion for the recording arts and sciences, right? Recording music, multi-track stuff. And this was the early to mid 90s. It wasn't very technologically advanced. We were still doing a lot of things on ADATs and tape and all that kind of stuff. But I loved the uh, the technical part of it for sure. I really geeked out on the gear, right? The equipment and the microphones and all that process. But I also like, kind of the artistry of it, figuring out how to, layer things and record things. And so at first it was just, whatever, me in my basement with a 4-track. And then I started, graduated to bigger bands and, going to real studios and learning from there and, started recording bands of my own. And then when I went to college, I originally went to college for music, as I said, but then kind of slowly migrated over to the recording stuff. And it was during that recording stuff, I remember distinctly, I was recording a band, this friend of mine, and one of the guys walked into the control room and he had, I forget what it was, maybe like a Hi8 camcorder, like, taped little bass camcorder. He's like, "Hey man, we're going to make a music video. Do you know how to use this camera?" And I'm like, "No, not really. But we'll have some fun with it." Right. And, the one thing led to another. And then like, they were like, "Well, could you like edit the different takes together?" And so slowly but surely I started to learn that. And eventually, by midway through my collegiate career, I had transferred kind of my focus over from music. I still graduated with a music minor and all that kind of stuff, but I transferred over to what the program was called the School of Media Arts and Design, doing more video kind of stuff. And this was the early days. This was like Video Toaster, Media 100, the early days of the Avid, that kind of stuff. But that really kind of got me down that path. And then, after college, I went to go work for some larger facilities. And this was, the heydays of the Avid, so really banging hard on the Avid, but also linear tape rooms. You guys, I don't know if you guys are familiar with big, huge control rooms with, 20 decks in them, and you're controlling them all with a, linear tape, complicated, big, heavy iron stuff. And I really
I will say for a lot of people listening to this, linear tape means this was when you actually literally had tape. Tape had replaced film. And it was cool, and that you could use it again. But this is like you had tape that was like an inch wide or something like that.
Oh, there
was reel.
It was the format wars in those days, right? Everything from, as you said, 1 inch and 3/4 to Betacam SP, Beta. Later on HD Cam. There was some original big digital formats like D1 and D2. I mean, yeah, it was the tape format days. But that
okay, question: did you have to like get out the scissors and cut this tape?
No. So I mean, to really super simplify it, right? In these big, linear rooms, what you would have is you'd have source decks, right? Where you'd have, your various camera sources that you popped in. So somebody would go, "Hey, we need tape, 1B, 1C, and 3D. Go throw those in the deck." And you're going, "Hey, I'm going to take in and out of this tape. And I'm going to take in and out of this tape, whatever." And you're controlling this all through a big, control panel through a switcher. And then on the other side of that, you have your record deck. So you're making decisions about where you want to go in and out, taking those takes, and then, lack of a better term, printing them over to those record decks, right? And in between, there was lots of complicated things that you could do in between that, dissolves and titling and texting. And these rooms, they often took multiple people to run. When you first graduate college, you're not going to sit there in front of this multi-million-dollar system, right? So you're often at that time, the role at the time was called an E2 or an assistant editor. You're basically responsible for making sure that the editor's job goes the way it was supposed to go, and the client's happy, and everybody has coffee, and all those kind of things. But that exposure got me into doing more and more kind of like technical fixes. I found myself being good at fixing technical problems, whether that be in the machine room with decks and stuff like that. And, that led on to eventually later me doing some more technical VFX color work in some of the early systems, the Avids and some of the other systems that were there, Quantel boxes. And then I really just got trusted by a few clients to, "Hey, can you make that shot look better?" And back then, it was very simple tools, very basic curves, very basic 3-way color correctors. And right around this time was right on the time that Final Cut Pro came out, right around 2000 or somewhere around there, 2001. Forget exactly when. And I jumped on that bandwagon full force. I became one of the first dozen or two people in the country to be certified by Apple as a Final Cut Pro instructor. And, kind of it was like, hey, Final Cut's the future. And then around 2005, after having gotten trained up on big color correction systems like the DaVinci 2K and the DaVinci 2K Plus and the 888 that the facility that I was working at had, I was like, hey, I can do this on my own. And that's when I started my own company.
And
Cool.
when he's talking about working on the big color systems, those were turnkey systems typically, where you spent many thousands, at times hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, million. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest, most powerful systems. It wasn't uncommon for them to be $1 million plus, right? I mean, these were, as you said, Neil, these were turnkey color systems that, if you look at what we're doing today in tools, like DaVinci Resolve or even in NLEs, in Premiere Pro or Final Cut or whatever, these things would feel archaic to you, even given the price. They were, for the large part, at first these big color correction systems were used in telecine setups, so that is attached to a film scanner, right? And so you'd scan that film into a videotape format, right? And then from that videotape format, you would do image correction on it. Later on, that became what's called a data cine, where instead of going to tape, you were scanning film and going to digital files, right? DPX files or something like that. And to where it graduated to where we are today, right? Not a whole lot of people are scanning film. It's just all digital stuff. So, yeah, and those boxes cost a lot. And I have a funny story about this. After getting trained up on some of these classic DaVinci systems, I was like, well, I can't afford, when I'm going on my own, to buy, $500,000, $1 million. I mean, granted, at the time I was 26 or 27 or whatever. Like, I can't do that. Mom and dad are not going to lend me that much money, So I did identify, there was this application at the time called Silicon Color. The company was called Silicon Color, and the application was called Final Touch. And it was super affordable at the low price of $25,000, right? And so I pinched the pennies together, took some loans out, borrowed and stealed, and I bought Final Touch 2K for $25,000-ish, right? And all was great for like 2 months with it. And then Apple announced that they had purchased Silicon Color and Final Touch, and it was now going to be included for free as part of Final Cut Studio.
Oh no!
Where 2 or 3 months before I had just, and 25 grand is still a lot of money. And I had, I'd scraped that together, and here I was holding the bag with a $25,000 purchase that was now for free. So that's, you live and learn in this world with technology and software. Sometimes it comes back to bite you.
They didn't pay you back for that?
They were like, sorry, we didn't know we were going to get bought by Apple. Apologies.
Yeah. So frustrating. Well,
we came out of a portrait photographer background, and as digital was coming in, a lot of the labs were going for some of the early capture methods where they could digitize a film in the lab and give you prints. And those were also the $1.5 million systems.
Yep.
And none of those systems worked anywhere near as well as they were promised to work. So they were constantly a problem. The labs had trouble getting the work out and getting it out in good quality. And virtually all of them were dead within a year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. It's true. I mean, it's, I think there's a tendency to romanticize, film just in general, from, a nostalgic point of view. It's what we knew. It's what we grew up in the movie theaters watching. And, but if you take a step back and really consider what film was, there's a lot of big downsides about film acquisition, right? From everywhere from cost to how the film is handled, how it's scanned, that process of making, there's a lot of different ways you can develop film, as you guys know, right? Whether you're doing, going to the negative, you're doing, various prints, how those prints are handled, the stocks, and I don't know. I look at film sometimes and I go, why are we romanticizing, things like gate weave and scratches and, all this stuff that kind of inherently made it a little nasty. But yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from those days. And right now, I'd say in the color world, a lot of the focus that I think a lot of colorists have and a lot of filmmakers have is trying to bring some of the aesthetic of the better parts of film acquisition into our digital world. There's a lot of focus by a lot of people on what we call film emulation or film print emulation. A lot of focus by people on texture, like things like grain and stuff like that. And I do feel like there's a place for that stuff, but I think that if you're shooting on a digital camera, you're never gonna. I mean, the only way that you can get the film look is go shoot some film. So yeah, I think we romanticize a little bit, but it's interesting to see how there's some parallels between the photographic world as well as the motion world.
Well, there is Mark Village is a noted the strip, and Mark and I have participated in a couple discussions on film emulations and this kind of stuff over at LGG. Mark got banned and I got censured because we were just for asking the question, why are you trying to copy something that was such a limited and dastardly mess to work with? And you just even asking that had people just outraged at us and complaining to the moderators. But Phil, man, you were fighting that stuff all the time. You couldn't match one day's shot with another one guaranteed, even if it was the same stock of film shot in the same camera with the same lens and processed in the same facility. And, if you were trying to match projects from several days and whatnot, it was just, you struggled with it. If you were trying to recreate something that you'd done before, God help you, because you had to get really good at it. And we had a constant running battle with labs over getting stuff done to our standards, because they said you simply can't do it to that standard.
Well, yeah, I mean, even the recipes for the stocks themselves, right? Like you get a batch of stock in January versus a batch of stock in August, and presumably it's the same thing, but oftentimes there were subtle differences. Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to this kind of thing, I think that the nostalgia rides high with a lot of people, and I get why people are passionate about it. And I think, as I said, I think there are certain aspects of film acquisition to chase, and that can add feeling and texture and subconsciously attach to people and make things feel good. So I'm not dismissing that, but I think this whole chase of like we need to make it just like that, I think is foolhardy. I think we're creating hybrids now with what we do. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the film Dunkirk, Christopher Nolan film,
right?
And it was graded by noted colorist Walter Volpato, who is a hero of mine and many others. And I love Nolan films. I love Walter's work, but I watched that film and I was just like, it's all shot in various flavors of IMAX and 35 and all sorts of 70 mil, all film. And I was like, watching a scene down, I'm like, nothing matches in this scene, right? Like nothing, like it's like all different, and like it took you out of the story. And I'm just like, that was the first time I ever felt that like, are people chasing this just because it's like this nostalgic thing to do and it feels right? Because it's certainly not adding like, I don't know, continuity to the show. It's like this shot's this and that, so I don't know. I think to each their own. And I think there's a lot of interesting processes that a lot of people are doing now in this regard. Very expensive, very technical, very scientific processes, like what's the film? Like, Dune, for example, right? Shooting digital and going back out to film and then rescanning that film back in, and there's a lot of people doing processes like that. I think for us mere mortals, working on, regular TV shows and, lower budget films, I wouldn't get obsessed about it. I would just say, figure out the characteristics that you like about films that you like, try to emulate those. And really all that matters at the end of the day is, hey, your clients give you the thumbs up and everybody's happy with it.
Walter Volpato was on a like a 2.5 or 3 hour teaching thing here on FMC a year ago. And as the moderator put it, he kind of fried their comments channel at one point when he was saying that, as to what he did for grain. Well, he said, now, if you're pointed out very correctly, if you're trying to technically imitate film grain, you have a different grain structure in the shadows versus the highlights versus the midtones. And depending upon what print film it's been on and any intermediate films it's been on, and then what your release films have been on, then you have some further changes there. And so it's really kind of a moving target to emulate. And he had spent a fair amount of effort one time where he had created grain in all kinds of ways, including a couple of the very expensive high-end plugins that a colorist like Walter would have access to that most
and
of them
let me guess, he came back to using just like the default grain generator in Resolve or something, right?
Exactly, because by the time they put it out on a deliverable file, and he had people from the industry in, and they watched it in a projection room exactly the way it would get delivered out. They could not tell the difference between Resolve's basic grain generator and when he did everything all over. And he did the same thing for streaming, and you couldn't.
Yeah, and Walter's lucky enough, I mean, because he's just a gifted colorist. But the productions that he's blessed to work on, they have the time, money, etc., to experiment with these kind of things. But yeah, I just think, like I said before, I just think that sometimes you're chasing your tail about this, and you can get really into the weeds with it, and start talking, densities and all sorts of stuff. My approach is just what feels good, what looks good on screen, and move on from there.
Right. One thing is that it still has to end up as a digital in the end.
Yep.
So, so you shoot on film, but it still gets turned into a digital. Yep. Anyway.
Sure.
So you are an educator, have been quite known, and you're in teaching this.
Yeah.
So you must really enjoy that. I'm guessing.
Yeah, there's a teaching streak in my family, and I was always, I'm sure if you went back and asked my folks, what I see it now in my son. My son's 8 years old, right? And he, now there's, he has 100 different cameras at his, disposal, right, to record, and he's sitting there, making videos about how to put, Legos together and how to do this. And I'm sure I was the same as a kid, trying to over-explain stuff, under-explain stuff, however you want to put it. But yeah, like I said, right around the the 2000s, right at the break of the turn of the millennium, there, I really dove deep into doing a lot of education stuff. I was part of doing a lot of books in the Apple Pro training series, both technical editing and editing. Right around that time, I was one of the first people doing stuff on Apple Color. I was an author for lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning. Had written a lot of books around the DSLR revolution with some friends. Obviously spoke, still do, speak a lot around the world at various conferences when, conferences were actually a thing and people got together in person. And then, a lot of online training, a lot of, webinars and stuff like this. And to me, teaching is two things. It's one, it's kind of a yin and yang thing. When I'm in the suite every day with clients, I get burned out on that, right? And it's just like, oh my God, I could just wish these people would just go away and leave me alone and whatever, right? So that teaching was kind of like the flip side of that same coin. It was a nice release valve. But it also, I think, especially in the early days of digital color correction, where people didn't understand a lot of the basics, scopes and, even some of the basic, the tools, then it was especially rewarding to see it just kind of click for people, right? And go, oh, wow, I can improve this. And now, 15, 20 years later, things have obviously gotten much more advanced. People's knowledge is much more, if you said the word, LUT or lookup table 10 years ago to people, they've been like, what are you talking about? Now anybody messing around in this space knows kind of what a LUT does, or, at least has an overview of it. So I think in general, there's a lot more people exposed to digital color correction. I think there's a lot more people that are familiar with the vocabulary and the vernacular of digital color correction, to where I think the teaching has blended these days, especially the work that I do and some of my partners do, is less from basic tool set kind of stuff. And it's more blending, getting now into the real math and science part of how this stuff works, right? Because having an understanding of that really allows you to create the most compelling, best images. And some people's heads explode with that. There's Neil's familiar, I'm sure, with a mutual friend of ours, this guy Cullen Kelly, who's a real gifted colorist, real gifted image scientist, and he has a really good ability to kind of make that really high end math and science stuff approachable. But some people's heads can't even get there. Some people, I'm sure you guys know people like this in the photography world, right? You're like, how can you take compelling pictures? You don't even know how your camera works, right? There's a lot of people. There are those people in the motion world too that are, they're artists, right? They don't care about the ones and zeros. They just want to paint on screen. So I find those two camps kind of where we are these days. But I'm leaning towards that person that's getting into the math and science part of it. I think that's especially as we get into, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit, but as we get into really multi-mediated deliveries, going from theatrical to TV to streaming to, SDR, HDR, having some understanding of that is important. But anyway, that's a round-winded way of saying, yes, education is something that's always been important to me, is important to me. And I do love seeing that. And more so, I would say, Miriam, that one of the things that teaching has really done for me over the years is that sense of community, right? And that sense of kind of, I know that if I can share a little bit of knowledge or somebody else shares a little bit of knowledge with me, there's a little bit of a bond that's created there, right? And, and that kind of thing, you do that over hundreds of thousands of times, you do start to feel like you're part of a broader community. And I look back over the past 20 years really fondly with that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of people who I've only interacted with because whatever, I've recorded a video about something, or, I've only, or vice versa. I've gone to a conference and sat in on a session and I'm like, I didn't know how to do that. That's really cool. So yeah, I think education is a real important part of what I do and what we all do. And I think you guys know this, looking out there in the world, there's a lot of educators out there now, and I think it's the one downside of the education stuff is that anybody with a microphone, a camera, and a YouTube account can put stuff out there. And I think I would just urge people to really be careful about some of the things that you follow, because there's a lot of stuff out there that just I would stay away from. But there's also a lot of really brilliant stuff too.
Yeah,
I first met Robbie through being involved with some testing of software kind of thing, shall we say, that one doesn't talk about. And in my newbiness to video stuff, challenged him. And so
I don't think that's the way it happened, Neil. I think you had said, hey, this guy is saying this, and I think it's BS. And then you didn't realize that was in the same forum, and I was like, hey,
exactly.
Neil, that's me.
Yeah, and this was on a forum that did not have very many people participating, right? It's like Saturday night at 7 p.m. here West Coast time, and I put up saying, "Hey, this guy is saying this thing on using this other software, and it's confusing people, and I'm having to check about." So I think he's wrong about this. And 30 seconds later, another post appears on this forum, which could go 2 days without a post, right? With someone saying the equivalent of if you were in a live greeting in a crowd, it'd be like you were saying that, and the guy next to you goes, just over your right shoulder.
We got it sorted out. It was a matter of semantics. I was saying it one way, you were saying another way, but we were saying the same thing.
So that was right before, just in the days before, Patrick Palmer had invited me to show up at NAB, which prior to that I hadn't his email. I didn't even know what it was.
Right.
So I was down there. NAB is this huge, more than 100,000 people attending conference in Vegas that is 5 days of teaching and a huge trade show with everything you can think of, from all the audio gear, the video gear. And when they talk about drones, they don't mean like the little quadcopter. Someone was pointing out, when you talk about a drone, you mean like that one up there. And of course, what he's pointing at is one of these 40-foot long things with a 60-foot wingspan, right?
Basically a helicopter, yeah.
Yeah. And so I got a chance, though, to see Robbie both teaching in what's called post-production world, or PPW, where he'd be up in a room with 150 to 300 people, and Robbie's got an hour and a half to teach color. And then I also got to see him teaching at Adobe's Max, and Robbie live teaching something like that, no matter whether he is teaching to absolute newbies on how to get started in thinking about color at something like Adobe Max, or he's at PPW, where most everybody in the room is a colorist or has been doing editing for some time and is now assigned, you got to learn how to do color here for our shop. So they all have quite a bit of knowledge. And it didn't make any difference whether he was teaching to a very experienced group or a very newbie group. He was clearly adapting what he was doing on the fly to fit that crowd. And I was incredibly impressed with that. That is rare in a teacher.
You're making me blush. You're making me blush, Neil. No, I appreciate that. And I will also share that during those Adobe Max sessions, those years that I was doing that quite a bit, Neil was often a huge help for me personally by being a teaching assistant in the room. And honestly, to this day, especially when it comes to Premiere Pro workflow stuff, and Neil will probably play bashful on this, but Neil has been my go-to support channel, if you will, for all things Premiere Pro and Premiere Color related. So right back at you, Neil. Thank you for your support and those kind words, and thanks for helping me out from time to time on problems that I have in Premiere.
Awesome.
Hey, I just found there's a way to get speed grade, the last speed grade loaded up on a at least on a Win 10 machine.
No thanks. No thanks.
I did that the other day. It just was playing around with it, and hot damn, I missed that.
Yeah.
9-way color on that thing was so easy and quick. Didn't need secondaries for most of the stuff I would need and everything. It was just so fast and easy to use, and I just go.
I never really gronked that application as much as I'd hoped to. It's without sounding derogatory, it was just very German, right? Very like even just like the wording of stuff, and it's just like, I don't know. I just found the UI and a lot of the bits hard to follow, but maybe that was just me. I don't know.
Well, yeah, the UI was weird and strange and everything, but once you actually got sorted out what it was doing with like the 9-way
it was
direction and everything, man, you could do stuff so freaking fast with a tangent elements panel and that stuff that it was just it was amazing. It's stuff that I struggle with still, trying to get the same kind of thing in Resolve, even though Resolve has a vastly more capable tool set to it.
What's funny about SpeedGrade, and maybe I have just PTSD from it, is that right when Adobe announced that they had purchased SpeedGrade or an Iridas, and it was an NAB, they were like going to show off like a kind of like a basically packaged Adobe version of it, right? And they never really did fully skin that into Adobe land, but some friends at Adobe were like, hey, can you come maybe just do some booth duty and talk a little bit about SpeedGrade and color? And I'm not, I'm kidding. I'm not on the booth for more than like 3 minutes when this like gang of people come over. And I think they were like, some from like some big state sponsored like television network. I think it was like in Hungary or Croatia or something like that. Right. So there was a little bit of a language thing, but then they were like, oh yeah, and this is, I don't know, when I don't even know when SpeedGrade would have been, what, 2010, something like that. I don't know. And they're like, yeah, we want to shoot everything like 8K stereo, and I'm like, they're like, how do you do that in SpeedGrade? I'm like, well, I don't know. And so, that was an interesting NAB because I spent a lot of time after hours trying to get up to speed with that application, so I didn't look like such a moron on the booth.
Well, that was one of its capabilities, was it could work with stereo, and that was fairly early on in the stereo.
It really was. It was actually one of the best applications out there for doing stereo work at the time.
But Lumetri that they came up with under Al Mooney there for Premiere was just not the equivalent of having SpeedGrade available. But well.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about Lumetri. My biggest thing about Lumetri has nothing to do with the tools. Well, it's more about the math behind the tool set. I think that one of the challenges that I find when I use it is it feels like the tool sets, the various tools in the Lumetri controls, are really set up to not allow the user, how should I say this,
to mangle your media,
to really break the image, right?
Yeah.
And to really and to really push it super hard. And I just feel a little limited by that sometimes. I'm sort of like, well, I need to go further than you're allowing me to go with this. And I think I can imagine the edict in those development rooms when they were building this is like, let's build something that for editors who are never going to become colorists and they don't really screw up their image, so we don't get in trouble.
Exactly.
And I don't know. I think they hit on a great opportunity with that tool set, but it's been a little disappointing over the years not to see them continually to really evolve it. I know that they're working on other aspects like color management pipelines and and stuff like that. But I would love to see an involvement in the next generation of that Lumetri tool set, because I do think for people who are using Premiere Pro, it can be a good tool set. I just think it needs to jump a few generations to be really worth it.
Well, I'm not being at all bashful about it. I'm one of the people can more figure out how to push Lumetri to do things that even the engineers are surprised I can make it do at times that you can find. And I agree with everything you said. It's you really have to know all the quirks about that thing to figure out how to get around the limitations that they put on your adjustment of the media. And yeah, it has I can mimic most of what people are doing in Resolve and a lot of the stuff I've seen. I can mimic much of that so that the average person is not going to really notice a difference and using Lumetri tools. But you have to know exactly what the hell you're doing and how to structure it in order to do it that way, and you shouldn't have to. And so, yeah, I've had some discussions. We even had Miriam went with me to the, we just had the first live NAB in a couple of years, and I finally got Miriam to go along with me. And of course, with both Patrick Palmer, who had created a REDOS that became SpeedGrade, and is now head of all of the Adobe video apps, and Francis Crossman, who was a color engineer who helped me with an article I did a couple of years ago on Premiere's color management, and is now the head of Premiere itself. For both of them, first thing was, hey, wonderful to see you live. It's really nice to actually see you in person. What the hell are you doing with the color in Premiere? And it was
I mean, listen, I feel whoa. I have, like you, I have, I'm not a developer or engineer by any means, but I've over the years I've interacted with a lot of those guys. And, and I think that the general public misses out on this one key fact about interacting with product managers, developers, etc., is that for every complaint that you have, amplify that by a bajillion trillion, right? I mean, like, everybody thinks that their feature request, their complaint about something is the only one that matters. You know what I'm saying? So if you're a developer, on a, let's say, the Premiere Pro team or whatever, and you're like, well, gosh, I wish I could really do this. They're having to organize and figure out and rank and thousands and thousands of requests and problems and bugs, and that's not unique to them. Obviously, every development team has to do that. I just think sometimes I look at forums and stuff, and it's just like, calm down, Tiger. Like the more you yell, you're less likely to get this fixed. So
all professionals will do it this way, and they screw it up for doing it, and it's like there are many other professionals that do it very differently than that. You have to allow for their existence, I mean, like, pull your ego back in a bit.
Yeah, so I think that's one thing that people should take away about software development in general, is that it's a lot more complicated and a lot more intense than people, I think, from the outside looking in, kind of can really understand. There's a lot of, I'm sure if you could be, if any one of us could be a fly on the wall in some of these meetings, I'm sure a lot of them get heated back and forth about where the priorities are and how to, should we develop this tool or that tool or fix this bug or fix that bug, because it all takes time, all takes resources, and it's interesting. So, we'll see what happens with Premiere.
Well, Go ahead,
Okay,
Mary.
I was just going to say that Mo will. He's having some technical issues
No worries.
evidently, but I'm sure he would be asking, "Are you going to play one of those guitars for us?"
No, I can't be on pressure right now. That's too much
Uh,
for me. Too much. Can't do it.
uh,
I know. I know. If I had a little time to prep, I just like to sit in my basement playing my guitar. No, I'm kidding. No, I would, but I'm gonna pass on that one today, Mary. I'm
another
sorry.
time,
Next time,
another time.
next
We'll
time,
have,
if
Okay.
have me on again with a little heads up on that, and
yeah,
we'll see what I can
I
do.
knew that would
So
be.
just as another guitar player, which is your favorite of your guitars and why? And what kind of music do you tend to play?
Oh man, that's a really hard question. So I have like the guitars that you see behind me are guitars that I play like all the time, right? Like some Strats and Les Paul and that kind of stuff, right? But I have a bunch of guitars that I seldom. They're more like pieces of art. They're more like guitars that I admire. Kind of take out of the case every once in a while, polish, put it back in the case. They're more like collectible kind of things. So I own a couple. I own a couple mid-70s Les Pauls that these days are probably pretty pricey. That I baby. I'm kind of like the, out of Ferris Bueller's Day Off with the Ferrari, polishing them with a diaper kind of thing. I think my day-to-day favorite is probably, I'm trying to think of what year that is. I think it's a 92 or 93 Les Paul 40th anniversary. It's a Black Beauty edition, so it's all black ebony with cream binding. I can find a picture for you of it.
I
But
love
it has
those.
cream P90s in it, and it's just a really nice guitar to play. Recently, I have gone in the past 2 years. I was never a big Fender kind of guy. I liked humbuckers, liked big, heavy, body, ES 335s and 339s and Les Pauls. But about a year and a half ago, I bought a Strat that I really like. It's their American-made Professional 2 Series, which is awesome. And then actually, I'm in the middle of it. I'm building from scratch. I'm building a Telecaster that to my own specifications, which has been a process because I've had to learn a lot of skills along the way. Like I was never really knew how to solder. Learning soldering skills. I've been learning various electronics bits, but yeah, my wife I think wants that project to be done because there's guitar parts for that project spread out like on every floor of our house. So I'm almost done with it. I got all the electronics installed this weekend. I got to get the tuning pegs on, get some strings on it. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. They're all my baby in a unique way. It's like your kids. None of them are more special than the others.
So what do you play?
I play a little bit of everything. When I was a teenager, I was a punk rock kind of guy. I've recently really developed a lot of feeling for a lot of 70s and 80s kind of like I think what we generally refer to as like yacht rock kind of stuff. Like a big Eagles fan. I love that kind of stuff, but also a lot of 80s hard rock, man. Like I can't go a day without listening to Guns N' Roses or Van Halen or Twisted Sister and any of those kind of stuff. But I am an equal opportunity person. I can have Peter, Paul, and Mary move me just as much as Guns N' Roses. So I kind of like it all.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
When we got married, I was lured away from being a college student by an instructor that Miriam and I had both had in college, who had a shop, and to work in his shop for a while as a guitar salesman, and I did some repair work in the back and everything. And we had B.J. Thomas and Johnny Rivers came to play the Oregon State Fair, and a couple of guitarists for BJ's band came into the store, and they needed a patch cord, and they were playing guitars and everything. And of course, those guys could just really play, and so they said they needed a patch cord, and said, yeah, we've got some over in the rack. They're like, no, we don't want one off the rack. We want one made, custom made. And said, you make them here. And the other salesman, who had a little bit more seniority than I did, said, sure. And so I said, can we see it? And so he pulls out one of his that he'd looked at, and they looked at, and then one of the guys looks at me and says, do you do them too? And I says, oh yeah. So I went and grabbed one of mine, and they looked at the two of them at the solder jobs and went, him. And
Yeah.
and so I did a patch cord for it, and he liked it, so he had me do a second one. So I did 2 patch cords for BJ Thomas's lead guitarist. It's my claim to fame there.
Hey man, that's
Wow.
that's cool. That's really cool. No, I mean it's fun. I mean, I think, you know, for me, you know, music and the guitar and stuff also represents a considerable amount of just sort of mental health, stress relief, kind of stuff, you know. And it also just gets, you know, it just gets a different part of the brain working as you're sitting there. If you're sitting on the couch noodling around and playing, I find like it gets, you know, oftentimes if I'm stuck on a business problem or some sort of other creative problem, right? Like I'm having a problem with grading the show or whatever, you know, just picking up a guitar for a little bit, noodling around is great fun. And yeah, I think the part of me that really gets into this too is getting back to the recording part. You know, like I'll tell you the short version of the story. For years and years and years, I was really into like the digital modeling aspect of effects and amps and, you know, doing IRs and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know, like a year ago, it just hit me. I'm like, this is really stupid. Like I had a lot more fun and was making a lot more music back in, you know, my teenage years when I had, you know, a distortion pedal, a reverb pedal, and like an amp, you know, and I was mic, you know, and so I made a real big effort the past year to go back analog, old school, built a big new pedal board that, you know, I have a lot more money than I had back then, so I have fancier pedals, right? But and I sold all of my fancy modeling stuff and all that jazz and going back analog, and it's pretty cool.
Very fun. Well, that's a great way to end the show, I think, here. And we are so glad that you joined us, Robbie.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I'm really keen on watching some future episodes of your show. This is a great service that I think you're doing for people just to, you know, kind of learn about different people in different parts of the, you know, the creative industry.
Awesome.
So kudos to you guys for sure.
Well, and one of the things we'll need to get on another time is like what, you know, we've talked outside the show is for people that are thinking that they just want to get into HDR and how crazy and odd and difficult it can be at times to try and get HDR functional between the camera, between your editing software and uploads. So
yeah, we should totally do that. My not to toot my own horn, but that is a passion of mine and something that I'm pretty good at. My partner Joey Deanna and I have, you know, we've been trusted by groups like Dolby to do, you know, training for this kind of thing, and we've been teaching people doing more importantly HDR programming for a number of years. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that, even, you know, if it's at a high level, because as you know, Neil, I feel passionately that high dynamic range workflows are kind of the future of post-production. You know, they are here, but more and more they're going to be touching everybody in post-production, not just the, you know, middle to high end. So yeah, love to talk about it. Let me know when you want to do that.
And for anyone listening, Joey and Robbie here, if you go to Dolby Labs site and you look at any of their training for how to use Dolby Vision, which is the ultimate quality HDR for professional use at this time, you're going to see 2 people on camera, and that's Robbie and his pal and partner Joey. So yes, he does know this stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Well, say goodbye, everybody.
All right, guys, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.